There it is. I'm resident of College for YouTube, and I'm joined by the two brightest men on the planet. And that's my story, and I'm sticking to it because they're awesome. Patrick McCray, my buddy, and my other buddy, Butch RosenBalm, they're here. We're going to discuss Dawn of the Dead and the Void, hopefully.
True. And Jewel, I have to say, it is good to see you, and I think the trash bags are under the sink.
Stop talking to my wife about where the trash bags are, okay? That's what I'm going to say to that.
In the drawer just beside under the sink, I think. I don't know why that came to my mind, but it's good to see you.
It's great to see. And let me just say this. Stop messaging my wife so she tells you where stuff is, okay? That's all I'm going to say to anybody here tonight.
The only thing your wife says in terms of where stuff is that the lovin's in the other room, and it's named Jewel.
Oh, God.
Oh, that's a good recovery right there.
That is. All right, guys. I'm going to, like before, like we tried on Zoom, I'm going to let you guys have the floor for Dawn of the Dead, so go right ahead.
Well, all right, then. This is a movie I've never seen, and Butch hasn't either. So we are eager, Jewel, for you to... No, just kidding. All right. Well, I'd like to introduce Professor L.F. Rosenbaum here, who is the... I don't want to use the word fan because there's nothing wrong with the word fan, but fan sort of is too casual. Which for a guy who does not have a degree in film, Butch has amassed easily a master's degree level of knowledge and shows a master's degree level of analysis when it comes to Dawn of the Dead, which is one of his two favorite films, along with The Wild Bunch, with which there are some similarities. He has traveled thousands of miles to see the stars, but more than that, this isn't just some goofy guy getting in line, or someone who then follows them back to their hotel room and makes them call security. No, this is someone who has seen Night of the Living Dead with George Romero, who has gotten to discuss these films with them, who has shown a degree of love that is rare and extends into the realm of, although there's no formal writing, of the scholarly, and it is humbling to be in the company of someone who has such knowledge and such passion for a thing. Most academics have gotten the love of anything squeezed out of them. And Butch, stay away from a master's program if you still want to love Dawn of the Dead. But if you want to know anything about the film or its implications, he is the guy to talk to. And just a couple of weeks ago on Halloween, was it Halloween? A few days before, something like that. We had the privilege of going to the movies, and it was his first time seeing it on the big screen. It was the 3D release that I guess Richard Rubenstein is putting out, because if George Romero were alive right now, he would be clawing desperately at the inside of his coffin. So he didn't have anything to do with it. That's horrible, but George would have found that very funny.
I probably wouldn't have.
Butch, are you finally going to stop talking so I can get a word in edgewise?
The one that is honored is me for someone to be introduced like that in such glowing terms by you, the man I refer to as Dr. Pretorius to my Frankenstein. There's an honor right there.
Yeah.
But yeah, he's right. I love this film. This is my favorite horror film of all time. It's one of my favorite horror movies. It's one of my favorite movies.
Yeah.
I can't gush enough.
It really does. It transcends horror. It's funny you should bring up Pretorius, because like Bride of Frankenstein, it's one of the best movies ever made that is also in the horror genre. So, of course, it's going to be one of the best horror movies ever made. But I think it's important to not let that just subcategorize itself out of existence. It's one of the best movies ever made. And my God, what a wonderful capstone with Apocalypse Now, and other films in 1979 to that decade of the 70s.
I have a strange question. Do you guys feel at times that George A. Romero was blackballed by Hollywood a bit?
Oh yes, oh yeah, definitely. There's a story about him going to a meeting with some executive, and there was a gentleman with him, and I don't remember who it was. And they sat down, they talk a bit. The studio exec goes, "Oh, just a minute, I got to take this call." George sits there. Okay, he hangs up. They start talking again. Gets another call. Just a second, I got to take this. Well, while he takes the second call, George looks at the guy and goes, "Come on, let's go. This guy isn't serious," and walks out. We George, George wanted to do things his way, and he didn't cotton to going and kowtowing to them, which I think was truth. While I respect him and enjoy all of his films, I think it kind of limited his career a little bit. John Carpenter, in my opinion, learned to play the game a little bit. And so John Carpenter's looked upon more favorably, whereas George is like, "Oh, you want me to do the Mummy? Well, here's my version. And we want you to do this, isn't it?" No, I'm not interested in that. And he would walk away. I mean, he was perfectly fine with it. He was interested in making what he wanted. And seemingly, I'm not in the Hollywood business, but seemingly Hollywood executives don't like that. They want to hear, "Oh, yes, sir. Yes, sir."
Yeah, I don't really know, all of the politics that went on because, I mean, good Lord, Carpenter certainly did his own thing, so I don't know to what extent I believe every word, but I don't know like where Carpenter compromised. That would be an interesting, where Romero wouldn't.
Memoirs of an Invisible Man, in my
Well, that
opinion.
was at the end, though. That wasn't
That's
that
still
for vampires.
that was before.
Yeah, that was right before vampires. So, yeah, but I mean, in that prime era, George must have ticked somebody off. But also, I think George was just as happy to it might not have been a compromise by any other filmmaker, but I think George is, what, I got a house, it's paid for, it's in Pittsburgh. I'm gonna go home, see Christine. See you later.
I know Butch has played the original Resident Evil and the Resident Evil games. I know I have too. George A. Romero has the best Resident Evil script that never got made into a movie. And if you haven't read it, after we get done with all this, I will leave a link in the description box where you can go read this beautiful piece of work. But I'm not so picky where it has to be exactly like the game, where it's shot for shot. Oh, that's from the game. That's not what Romero did in that script. What he did was he took some of the game and just left it somewhat familiar enough to the gamers, but yet still made the movie his own. And that's what I want to see. If you were to ask me right now, what's the best video game movie ever made? I'd say Silent Hill in a heartbeat. No question. This had the potential to be the best Romero script. And it's criminal it didn't get made.
I'm with you. I'm with you. I know that it would have had no, Mila Jovovich floating in fluid sea. And to me, that's really all I want in any movie. But I still think it would have been a good movie despite that. Now, Joel, are you counting the Jean-Luc Godard? What was it? Pitfall? Remember Pitfall? That game?
Yeah, I remember Pitfall.
And yeah, and it was I forget. I think it starred Gerard Depardieu, and it was the most faithful to a video game movie ever made. And it was just Gerard Depardieu running, grabbing a rope, going over a pit, running some more, and it was just that for 2.5 hours, and then credits roll.
Those wacky French and their adaptations.
This was faithful, though. They said, finally, we will be faithful to the American, and we will show what great artists they are.
Uh-huh.
I think the one thing I walk away from us with video when it comes to video games and movies, and this is sort of where Silent Hill gets. Pyramid Head was never meant to be the game's mascot. And unfortunately, that's what he's become. Very unfortunately.
Yeah, and and the thing is with Romero and Resident Evil, okay, George didn't do Night of the Living Dead by himself. He didn't do any of his films by himself.
Right.
But let's be honest, and I was reading an interview with Tom Savini this week, whose birthday was recently, and he said, look at all the people he worked with on Night of the Living Dead, and they made this genre. Now, how many of them did he ever work with again? And how many of them that even continued to work, like John Russo and Bill Heinzman, ever created anything approaching that? George was the creative person. And, he really is the godfather of the zombie genre. And you got, Resident Evil exists because of George Romero. Walking Dead exists because of George Romero. Pretty much anything zombie related in the last 30 years exists because of him. So,
I mean, that's not based on White Zombie.
Or Macumba Love.
Yeah.
It's just, I don't know. I guess it's too much to ask for somebody to go, well, we're working in this genre, and the guy that created it is like right over here. Let's give him a call. Which, I mean, I guess they did, but again, those studio politics games get in the way, and again, I'm kind of with Patrick. There's nothing wrong with enjoying Milla Jovovich doing whatever it is she's doing, but that has exactly nothing to do with the game.
It doesn't. I would play the video game if it did.
Play Bayonetta. You would like that.
Sure. When I hear of the Silent Hill sequences, I always think, well, they weren't silent because they always had, or those silent Benny Hill sequences. When I heard Silent Hill, I thought it was just going to be a bunch of those. You can imagine my disappointment.
All kidding aside, he just gave me what I think is a cool idea. Imagine Silent Hill as a black and white silent film.
Yep.
Or imagine Benny Hill fighting zombies.
With wackety sacks.
It wouldn't be up here that would be vulnerable. It would be hitting the groin to take out the zombies. That's a good movie. It sounds refreshing at this point. I mean, not to be hitting the groin, not if you're a zombie, but Can you tell we've already talked about this movie once, and we're kind of like almost reluctant to go back to it because it was so good.
It was, man.
It was really good.
For anybody
about how good the podcast was that we did.
Yes.
Did, for anybody that doesn't know, we did this last week, and truthfully, of all the videos I've done with Joel, with and without Patrick, that was probably the best. And freaking Zoom.
James Brown's pit crew coming after you with a little cape to help you off the stage, Butch. You were that good.
But then running back up and doing some more, please.
Yes, that's what it was. So yeah, because I thought long and hard about this, because we don't want to drive ourselves crazy trying to recreate it. Some very basic questions. Like the worst, like the most cliched is, when did you first see Dawn of the Dead? But I'll ask you, when did you first see Dawn of the Dead?
I saw it approximately 1984, 85. My cousin Mike was at UT, and this is how long ago that was. We would go rent a VCR and rent VHS tapes.
Oh.
And he's like, "Oh, you like Night of the Living Dead? Well, this is the sequel to it." I'm like, "Oh, really?" I didn't know. There wasn't really, there was no internet, and I had just really started getting into horror. I don't think I had any Fangorias yet. So I remember watching it, and the scene in the tenement house when Wooly loses it and kicks open the door and blows that guy's head off. I remember turning, looking at my cousin, and going, "You can't show that." And he laughed and he said, "It's unrated. They can show anything." And I think it was after. I mean, that literally blew my mind. And after that, it was just, man, I love this film. And a couple years later, we were at Kmart, again, showing my age. It was either my birthday, the day after my birthday, and my sister was like, "Well, if you find something, let me know." And over in the VHS tapes, they were, the stuff they're getting ready to get rid of, I come across this copy of Dawn of the Dead. I'm not going to go get it, but it's like 10 feet away still. And I was like, "Oh my God, here, buy me this, buy me this." It's like $9.99. And like I said, that's like 85, 86, and I still have that. Of course, there's been a few other copies that don't still exist, so because they got played to death. But yeah, I think I was seeing that head blown away. Just I was like, we have entered a new level, and everything that is wrong.
Yeah. I think that when I first saw this in 1992, I was shocked because here's the thing: the 80s. It's weird to describe what the late 70s and 80s were. It was like a transition from horror to horror action, and there was the best of both worlds. And I think really, when I look at Dawn of the Dead, it is the best of both worlds. It's horror, but there's action too. And really, the one thing I love about it most is how great it was written and shot. It's still for a movie, it doesn't look like a Hollywood production.
No,
And that's what's so great about it. Too. Yeah. What did you like about it, Patrick?
What do I like about it, or when did I first see it?
Both, man.
Well, okay, those are two very different questions. I'm talking about when I first saw it. I had heard about the movie, of course, since its release, and it was kind of this legendary thing. There were levels of horror films that seemed to exist that were, the unrated and so on, and the legends largely coming from babysitters whose boyfriends maybe had gone to see these or whatever. The legends surrounding this were so great. This and Zombie were so intense. I knew people who said, "Oh, I couldn't watch that without throwing up," or and so it was like a roller coaster. For me, it took me a while to get on a roller coaster because it was just an experience so intense, and I knew once I was in it, I couldn't get out. And I think I was like maybe 8 or 9 before I got on a roller coaster, really. And Dawn of the Dead had the same kind of reputation. It was King of the Mountain in terms of just raw terror. And there's a movie theater down the street that showed old movies, and they were showing Dawn of the Dead, and they were showing it at like 9:30 on a Sunday. And so I went with my mother and her boyfriend. Her boyfriend was a big horror film fan, and she liked to go to horror movie too. It just depended. And here the bar came down like on a roller coaster. It's like, well, too late now. And I think she was sort of mortified, but couldn't do anything about it once it started because she would have been a total spoil sport. There were 940 people in this theater. Packed. It was utterly packed. And this is years after it was released. This is 1984, early 1984. And
And looks like he froze.
Yeah.
Hey, I'll hop in while he gets reconnected. I tell you something I didn't realize till years later about Dawn of the Dead. I remember hearing on the radio they had some midnight movies around here, and I always remember the tagline: "When there's no more room in hell, the dead will walk the earth." Because I mean, it's like a 5-year-old kid that terrified me.
Gandhi.
He's back.
Yeah. So which added to the carnival-like atmosphere. But I mean, there were people screaming, there were people throwing up, really regurgitating. It was mass chaos. And yet, when there was a dramatic scene, you could hear a pin drop. So this was a pretty amazing atmosphere to see the movie in. I mean, I would say that the biggest money shot of money shots, and it really gave you the notion of what mattered in a raw Titus Andronicus audience sense in this movie, was when the guy gets ripped apart. Not, I guess it's not Blades, but it's one of Blades' pals, maybe the guy with the sombrero or something. When he gets ripped apart and feasted upon, which I think is the movie going as far as it possibly can in the gore department, and it was like being in a Roman Colosseum back in the heyday, and I really was changed by that movie. I've never been a big sports guy. I've never been a big music guy. I've never, at a concert or any of that stuff. I mean, I saw Wayne Newton do a tribute to Elvis. We gave him 2 standing ovations. I sat next to a dental hygienist. We were all very polite. That's about the extent of my musical wildness. Being caught up in that atmosphere was probably the furthest I've ever gone in an ecstatic, transcendent group moment. And I don't think that would have happened had the drama in the film not been as good. These are marvelous, studied, subtle performances. This is riddled with one human moment after another as these characters connect. And really, what you come away with is that everybody wants to talk about the social commentary and the commentary on capitalism and all of that, and yet golf clap. Oh yeah, we get it. And to me, the stuff that really matters is the mature depiction of relationships, of platonic relationships, of romantic relationships, and how under these horrible circumstances they nevertheless defy any cliche. Any place where you think this relationship with these characters are just automatically going to do this. Oh, it's this guy. He's automatically going to be like that. Now, the movie has something else in store. And we talked a lot about this. There's a moment that I really love that I forgot about. And it's when the biker is trying to communicate with them on the radio. And you would think that he would have just been taunting the hell out of him at the beginning. But it actually seems clear that he's trying to pull off a scam. And he's trying to shut the other ones up, and he can't do it, which that's a metaphor for Night of the Living Dead and Dawn of the Dead right there. But even he is defying expectations. And there's a part of me that really wonders if it had been a better day and if Peter and Blades had for some reason encountered each other and somehow gotten to talk, maybe not Peter, Stephen, that there actually might have been some sort of agreement for how this could be a fortified base for both of these groups. That, as crazy as bikers are, they've been surviving like this for a few months. You would think that might have scared a little bit of civilization back into them. Rather than going more feral when they have this opportunity for something they might actually, just on a sober day, sit back and say, if we just keep it in our pants a little bit, this nightmare could be less. But I don't know. And I'm done.
Good.
I'm spent.
Good, Butch.
Next. How was
I
that? Hear any of that last week?
No, there wasn't. Even if they had that discussion and come to terms, sooner or later, we're humans. We'll screw it up.
Screwed it up.
Yeah, one of the bikers would have, made a pass at Fran, or maybe done worse, or one of my favorite scenes in the film, and it's not because it's in the film, is when Blades is chasing after Peter and he stabs up after him and he's like, "I see you, Chocolate Man." And Tom Savini tells the story that after George said cut, Ken Frey looked at him and said, "Chocolate Man?" So every time I see that scene, I hear Ken Frey go, "Chocolate Man?"
Did Savini just ad-lib that?
Yep.
Who's ever heard of a racist biker?
I'll say this too: when you look at Night of the Living Dead and look at Dawn of the Dead, Dawn of the Dead really takes advantage of one thing more than what Night of the Living Dead is, and that is the zombies aren't the only danger. The humans are. They're a danger to themselves because they fight amongst each other. So we're seeing that in this movie. We saw it a bit in Night of the Living Dead in the house, but this is even more so.
Yeah, well, actually, I kind of look at it just a little bit different because nobody gets along in Night of the Living Dead.
Right.
Nobody. And for a good portion of the film, after Peter establishes dominance, let's say, our four main characters get along for the most part. But by the same token, he has enough of a powerful personality. When the scene with the biker on the CB that Patrick was talking about, and she'll say, Fran will say something, and Steven will say something, he'll be like, "Shut up and listen."
They're kind of dealing with parallel.
And they're smart enough to realize they're in a situation that they need his guidance and his wisdom and his experience. Whereas in Night of the Living Dead, the implications has always been to me a little bit, "Oh, this is going to blow over. It'll be okay tomorrow or the next day." And they don't really grasp, no, life will never be normal ever again.
Is it Steven who gives them away with the it's mine?
It's ours. We took it.
If they had stuck with Peter's plan, it would have worked out fine because he even predicts somebody's going to get in here.
And he even says, for the first time in two films, 1,000 zombies will be in here. It's the first time the word is mentioned in either film. And he's like, "Yeah, go close the doors, hide up, let them do their thing. Let the zombies take some of them out, let them take out some zombies, and then we'll mop up." But Steven's like, "Nah, screw this." Which I kind of understand, They had come to look at the mall as their house. And what are you going to do when somebody breaks into your house? You're going to defend it. But Peter was smart enough to realize this isn't our house. This is where we're living, but this is not our house.
It's interesting because, to get crazy academic for just a second, this movie's a very good demonstration of John Locke's theory of property. Because, our discussions of property and rights and the Enlightenment, they all come together. And John Locke is always the guy who gets referred to. And Locke said that property basically is anything that you have substantially changed and altered in an individualistic way. So you go out in a field and, you fence it and you till it and all that. Well, that's your property at that point. So yeah, property is a big issue in this movie. It's mine, it's mine, and they have really, when they, by cleaning this place up, it kind of morally is their property at that point. Just an academic side note that kids can use to get by on a test or something. John Locke.
Interesting.
The Void. Yes.
For those who have seen both the original and the remake, what would you guys say is the biggest differences between the two?
The original's good.
Yeah.
That would probably be my knee-jerk answer, but truthfully, Patrick was, Patrick may recall when the remake was announced, and I was like, oh man. And I tried to keep an open mind, and I went and saw it, and I went and saw it by myself. I remember it perfectly well, because I think Patrick's like, you want me to go? I'm like, no, man, I need to see this alone. Let me process it. And it's not bad. It is a completely different film, which, thank God, if you're going to remake a classic, don't remake the same film. Make a different film.
We had mobile crisis outside the theater, just waiting for what to find inside.
That's probably not far from the truth. The difference is you kind of mentioned this being a horror action film. The remake is basically an action film with horror elements.
Yeah.
It tries to have some character moments, and not that the actors are all bad or can't do it. It just, to me, it's a lot more shallow, and I don't know if that's indicative of more modern filmmaking and the story they're trying to tell.
Yeah, too many characters. It's just
Definitely.
saturation, the film gets diluted over this wider cast of characters, and what are you gonna do? I guess have the zombies move fast. Okay, there is nothing. I really think there is nothing to this story that could be told any better than George Romero told it. And at the end of the day, this is not a matter of how good could this movie be, this remake. It's how bad can it not be? Well, I mean, this is like, it's like trying to redo your prom night, or just like no. There are some films. I mean, I guess every movie could be remade, but I don't think Zack Snyder is the visionary to sit down and say, we could talk about X, Y, and Z with a remake of Dawn of the Dead. Why? Let's do that. There's nothing new. You might be able to do something new with Casablanca. You might be able to do something new with Citizen Kane. Sure, media moguls and so on and so forth, broader strokes, but people in a mall fighting off zombies, it's going to be a tale of consumerism. And the effects of that, and the metaphor of that. And how are you going to do that better than George did? Shit, the mall itself is dying. I don't know if you could remake this movie now, because malls are being closed right and left.
Mm-hmm.
Did you notice when we went to see the 3D, there's a scene when they first come up in the mall, and Roger goes, what the hell is it? And Steven goes, it's one of the big indoor shopping malls. At the time when this film was made, 77, 78, those were a new thing. And I knew this thing was coming up. I kind of listened back over my ear, and I did hear someone kind of chuckle, because I'm sure they were like, how do you not know what a mall is? It's like, well, this was 40 years ago. Things, just like you said, things have changed. I mean, Would it now be, I guess now would be a super Walmart or something, as opposed to a mall.
There's a rash of Walmarts closing. I mean, the zombies would be on Amazon.
Well, they already are on Amazon.
Actually, an Amazon warehouse.
Yeah.
An Amazon warehouse is where they would have to hold up. And that's kind of an interesting idea because you got the robots in there. You've got all of the mechanics and stuff. You have all of the disgruntled workers. That's holding their bosses hostage, using the managers as bait to keep the zombies away. I don't know. There's you could do a really ugly remake of Dawn of the Dead set in an Amazon warehouse.
You could make an interesting Terminator prequel. You drop the zombies and deal with the robots.
Yeah. Yeah.
Don't get me wrong, I love Vin Rames. He's a great actor, but I sort of wish they would have cast Jim Brown in the remake, and not been a cop, but been the leader of a biker gang, and did it that way.
Okay, sure.
I'd just let him be Jim Brown.
That too.
I mean, the other way to do a responsible Dawn of the Dead remake is that, yes, even though it's taking place now, you tell it from the biker's point of view.
Yeah.
One of the things we talked about last time was how all of the side characters are really rich in this movie. That even it's so well cast and so well performed and so well written that even with just a line or two, I want to know more about these people. The Richard France character, logical, him, even one of my favorite characters, and there are so many favorite characters in the movie, the rent-a-cop, who just walks off his job, I think. Yeah. What's his
in the
story?
studio?
Yeah.
The priest with one leg. That man is so interesting, and apparently he was just like there, or somebody knew him, and I think he really is a priest. And George is like, "Hey, want to be in a film?" And it's like, that's the great thing about George. And I think about tying it back a little bit to his independence. It's like, he'll look at Tom Savini, and Tom Savini will look at him, and they go, "Why don't we do this?" And they're like, "Okay," and they go do it, and it works.
Yeah, I take it this was not a SAG movie, because they couldn't have gotten away with a lot of that stuff. I think under a lot of Screen Actors Guild rules. I wonder if this movie was scab. I don't know, but
I
then
have no idea.
extras don't exactly talk, so who knows?
That'd be a question for Tom Savini maybe the next time if either of you guys see him at a con.
If you want some good Savini, I highly recommend the Gilbert Gottfried's Amazing Colossal podcast episode where they interview Savini. And he talks about this, and he talks about a lot of his favorite films. Even if you've got a problem with the Gilbert voice, you get over it really fast because of how he geeks out over these people and his depth of knowledge, and his co-host. It's really prime stuff. And it's the best interview Savini ever did. It's long. It's well over an hour.
There's also the Savini, and there's also a George Romero documentary, both on Tubi for free. The Savini is Smoke and Mirrors, and the name of the George Romero is escaping me. But if you pull up the Savini one, it's down under it.
What's you guys' favorite scene in this movie?
I can't do that.
Yeah. Yes, every scene.
Seriously, I can't. I mean,
okay.
No.
Can I? Here's a better question. That's a private joke. May I phrase it a slightly different way? Butch, the last time you saw the movie, what was a scene that leapt out at you that maybe you weren't expecting for it to have the impact it did? Or a scene you were just happy to see on the big screen?
There is one scene, and I dread it every time. It's kind of like if you've ever read I Am Legend. There's a certain chapter dealing with a dog, And it gets to that chapter, and I'm like, oh God, I can't read this again. But you have to read it. I'm not going to spoil anything.
Yeah.
It's after Roger has been bit, and he's getting into the car. He's in the back of the hatchback, and here comes this zombie, and she squeezes his leg, and just blood just gushes through the bandage, and he's like, ah! And I know it's not real. You know, I know Scott Reiniger was not bitten. I know that's not a wound. I know that's an actress. I know that's, you know, Karo syrup or fake blood. But every time I just
You
and
winced visibly when we were watching the movie.
I do every time I watch it.
Yeah.
There's times I won't even. I'll just turn my head and won't watch it because if I were, you know, if I were as cool as Roger, Scott Reiniger's character, that's who I would want to be. I mean, Peter's cool. I could never aspire to be Peter. I have delusions I could be Roger. I'd probably be Steven, you know, shooting the wrong way. I think that's where most of us are. I think that's one of the reasons he's not a very popular character is we see too much of ourselves in him. But Roger, I love Roger, and we know it's coming, and it's just like, so it's like, you know, your friend is dating someone that is no good for them, and you know what's coming. Everybody knows what's coming, and then it finally comes, and all you can do is just wince away and try to be there for them.
Yes.
Tom Savini in this movie as an actor was really underrated. I know he's more known for his effects and directing, but why don't you guys think do you think it's more, I don't think we're trying to say, do you think it's more the system is why he didn't become more of a known actor?
I think he wanted to. I think he was happy doing special effects and doing special effects under very specific liberties.
Yeah.
Richard Liberty, for instance, but under very specific liberties, working with people like George Romero gave him. I think, you know, he strikes me as a very independent guy.
Mm.
He strikes me as a guy who's happy with, you know, not crazy movie star memes,
Yeah.
but you know, he's got his own makeup school, and you know, he really you know, blew out the edges of the envelope on any project he did. He's great. I mean, I'm sure if Hollywood rung his phone off the hook to be in a movie, he would have said, "Yes, I am not going to turn down $3 million to appear in this film." God knows, I would have happily seen, you know, Robert Rodriguez make a series of Sex Machine action movies. You know, but yeah, I don't think there was anything nefarious. I get the idea it's probably just what he wanted. What do you think, Butch?
I agree. And if you want to see a powerhouse performance by him, Night Riders, a completely underrated Romero film. But also, there was, I don't know the full story. In fact, I've gleaned just a little bit. Apparently, there was something with his daughter as he was kind of moving away from effects and into acting, and he kind of had to step back and help her. Again, I don't know the specifics, so I may have some of that wrong. So that wasn't, but kind of ties into what you said. That wasn't his priority. You know, I think he, like you said, he enjoyed doing what he did. And like he talked about in that interview I mentioned that I was reading, he's like talking about playing, he was doing a lightsaber fight with his grandson. You know, that doesn't sound like to me like somebody's like, won't you ring? Won't you ring? Damn it.
Before we do the void, is there anything you guys want to add for Dawn of the Dead?
No. We talked about it so much last week.
Before we talk about the void, I'm sorry, guys. I'm sorry.
It's not you, Joel. Nobody goes.
I know. I was like, my wife's like, what happened? I'm like, I don't want to talk about it.
Well, I'll hop in. Things I want to say. This is the greatest zombie film of all time. I personally think it will never be topped. I know it will be topped for me. That doesn't say there hasn't been any good zombie films made since after it. It's been called a comic book film. It is the colors are great. They're saturated. It tells an interesting story with interesting people doing interesting things. It's written well. It's directed well. It's edited well. The effects. You know, one of my complaints with Westerns used to always be with the John Wayne films, it was, oh, you got me, you know, and maybe have some ketchup in their hand. Yeah, no, this is what this would look like. I mean, this is a gut punch. I'm afraid, though, as time has moved on, the younger generation will look at it and go, well, this isn't that scary. You know, the same crap that they said with the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre. And it's like, if you think this isn't scary, I can't help you. But I love this film. It's great fun. It is not a family film, so don't show it to a 3-year-old.
Theater saw it. There was like a 3-year-old kid.
Yeah, I couldn't believe that. And I wanted every seat in there filled, but it's not a family film. But it's a great film, and it's a great horror film. And if you haven't seen it, go watch it. And if you watch it and you don't like it, I can't help you. You need to go watch another podcast.
Jewel, I have a thought.
Yes.
It passed. No, I have a thought, and it's this. You know what I wish we had been able to do when we talked about The Void?
Yes.
I wish we had been able to talk about it alongside the movie Prince of Darkness. And I have a wild proposition.
Sure.
What if, because we've talked about Dawn of the Dead for about an hour, what if we tabled the Void discussion to next week?
Okay.
And to give it freshness, we talked about it and Prince of Darkness in the same podcast and combined them.
Okay. That would be perfect. Let me stop recording, guys, and I'll talk to you.
Okay.
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 Or